Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're jumping straight in today, April 12th, 2025. What a rapid rundown of the big stories coming out of India. Quite a lot happening.
It certainly is.
Okay, here we go. Chennai Super Kings, they've suffered a historic home defeat in the IPL. Passport applications, there's a simplification regarding spouses' names. A grand Hanuman Jayanti celebration reported in Jabalpur. Growing concerns about destabilization efforts in India's northeast.
Right.
The nation's first GaN-based semiconductor plant is up and running in Chhattisgarh. DRDO successfully tested its Gaurav glide bomb.
Significant.
A new NITI Aayog report highlights needs for automotive industry growth. The NIA is intensifying its interrogation of Tahawar Rana in the 2611 case.
Still ongoing.
A dust storm caused chaos, major delays at Delhi airport. Filmmaker Dr. Sapna Samant's OCI status potentially facing revocation.
Interesting.
The SEBI chairman has outlined his vision for the Indian stock market. Challenges, though, persist for the PM-WANI public Wi-Fi scheme.
Yeah, we've heard about that before.
The Indian Consulate in Melbourne, sadly, vandalized again. And finally, good news maybe, India's monsoon season expected to be less extreme due to neutral Pacific conditions.
Yeah. That really is a whirlwind of information, isn't it?
It is.
So you just heard those headlines, basically a snapshot of India today. Our goal here, our mission in this deep dive, is really to get beyond just the surface noise.
Yeah, to unpack what's really going on.
Exactly. To understand the context, the implications of all these, well, quite diverse events. We're seeing this fascinating mix, aren't we? Sports, social policy, tech advances, security worries, economic shifts.
All intertwined.
Absolutely. So where should we start? Maybe with that surprise in the IPL.
Yeah, let's do that. Because for Chennai Super Kings fans, yesterday was, well, a shocker, a historic setback.
Right.
At home, in Chepauk, their fortress, they lost to the Kolkata Knight Riders by 8 wickets.
And it wasn't just any loss, was it?
No, not at all. This is the first time ever in IPL history that CSK has lost 3 consecutive games on their home turf.
Wow.
And it adds to their losing streak this season, making it 5 matches now. It's a really uncharacteristic slump for them.
And didn't they have a captaincy change for this match, too?
They did, yeah. Ruturaj Gaikwad, the usual captain, he was out injured.
Okay.
So the veteran, MS Dhoni, stepped back into the captain's role.
Ah, Dhoni back at the helm. But it didn't quite turn things around.
Not with the bat, unfortunately. He came in quite late, down at number 9, I think.
Number 9, that's low.
Yeah. And he only managed a single run before getting out in the 16th over. It kind of underscored the whole batting struggle for CSK that day.
And the total score reflected that struggle, didn't it? It was remarkably low.
You're absolutely right. They only scraped together 103 for 9 in their 20 overs.
103.
That's now their lowest ever score at Chepauk Stadium.
Ever.
Ever. And it's the 3rd lowest total in their entire IPL history. Plus, it's the lowest score by any team so far in this 2025 season.
That's really saying something. KKR's bowlers must have been on fire.
They really were. Relentless. They just dismantled the CSK batting lineup.
And KKR's chase must have been pretty straightforward.
Absolutely. Needing just 104, they knocked it off with incredible speed, finished it in just 10.1 overs.
Wow, quick work.
Sunil Narine was the star for KKR. He smashed 44 runs off just 18 balls.
18 balls.
Yeah, 2 fours, 5 massive sixes. He just set the pace right away. Rahane Dekak chipped in 2, made it look easy.
So Narine got player of the match, I assume?
Deservedly, yes. His all-round performance was exceptional. But for CSK, well, this heavy defeat leaves them in a really precarious spot this season. Big questions about whether they can bounce back for the playoffs.
Yeah. Tough times for the Yellow Army. Okay, moving from the cricket pitch to government procedures, there's been a significant update regarding passport applications.
That's right. A change from the Ministry of External Affairs that should make things easier for a lot of people.
Okay.
Basically, you can now get your spouse's name included on your passport without needing a marriage certificate as the only proof.
Oh, interesting. So what's the alternative?
They've introduced something called the Joint Photo Declaration. It's referred to as Annexure J. That could be used instead.
Annexure J. Okay. And what's the thinking behind this? Why the change?
Well, the main goal seems to be tackling the differences in marriage registration across India.
Ah, right. It's not uniform everywhere.
Exactly. Especially in some northern states, formal registration isn't always common practice, unlike, say, Maharashtra, where it's more standard. This declaration is meant to bridge that gap.
Makes sense. So what does this joint photo declaration actually involve? What do people need to provide?
Okay, so both the applicant and their spouse need to give their full names, state their marital status, current address, and provide a self-attested joint photo.
Joint photo, okay.
Plus, they need their Ahar numbers, voter ID numbers, and passport numbers if they have them. And both have to sign it, of course. It's still subject to verification by the passport office.
Seems pretty comprehensive, but maybe more accessible than digging out a certificate for some. What about the other way around? Removing a spouse's name.
For that, you still need the formal legal documents.
Yeah.
Like a divorce decree from a court or an official court order dissolving the marriage.
Right, that makes sense.
And similarly, if you're divorced and remarried, you need to show proof, like a remarriage certificate or updated ID, Aadhaar verification, to get the passport updated correctly.
Got it. So overall, this looks like a positive step, streamlining things, making it more inclusive.
Absolutely. Officials seem optimistic it'll really simplify the process, especially for people in those regions where getting a marriage certificate was a real hurdle.
Yeah.
It shows a commitment to making things, more user-friendly.
Good to hear. Okay. Shifting focus again, this time to cultural events. We heard about a very grand celebration for Hanuman Jayanti in Jabalpur.
Yes, quite spectacular by the sounds of it. The Pachmatha Hanuman temple there was the hub. The main highlights were, get this, a massive 56-dish Maha Thali.
56 dishes.
56. And alongside that, a colossal 5,000-kilogram ladu.
5,000 kilos. That's enormous. A huge display of devotion.
It really was. And that 56-dish thali, it wasn't just random. It was specifically curated to represent India's culinary diversity.
Ah, like a symbol of unity and diversity.
Exactly. They had dishes from all over, like dokla from Gujarat, liti choka from Bihar, even payen from Banaras, sort of a taste journey across India.
That's a beautiful concept.
Yeah, people involved, like one devotee named Shraddha, quote in the reports, talked about the love and effort that went into it, bringing all those regional flavors together.
And it wasn't just about the food, right? There was more significance this year.
Absolutely. This year marked the Silver Jubilee 25 years for both the Temple Service Committee, the Hanuman Mandir Seva Samiti, and the women's wing, the Mahila Mandal.
Ah, a double celebration then.
So it was actually a 3-day spiritual festival. Lots of bhajans, devotional singing, offering of Bhogal sacred food, and special prayers to Lord Hanuman, of course. Jagadguru Raghav Devacharya also spoke, emphasizing Hanuman's significance, his strength, devotion to Ram, selfless service.
And for listeners who might not know, Hanuman Jayanti itself is a major festival.
Yes, it's observed on the full moon day of a Hindu month of Chaitra Purnima, celebrates the birth of Lord Hanuman, revered for his loyalty and strength. People fast, chant verses, offer prayers.
Right.
But this celebration in Jabalpur really sounds like it stood out this year. The scale, the food, but also how it showcased that cultural and spiritual harmony. Sounds like a truly memorable event.
Definitely sounds impressive. Okay, let's turn our attention now to some potentially worrying developments from India's northeastern region.
Indeed. Pradyot Bikram Manikya Debarma, he's the chief of the Tipra Motha party in Tripura, a major player there. He's raised some serious concerns.
About what specifically?
About remarks made by some prominent figures in Bangladesh, including Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus. Debarma feels these comments hint at an underlying effort to destabilize India's northeast.
Destabilize, that's a strong word.
It is. He voiced these concerns during a meeting with surrendered militants from the National Liberation Front of Tripura. He warned that Pakistan's ISI might try to exploit unemployed youth in the region to stir up trouble.
So he's calling for vigilance.
Exactly. Heightened vigilance and proactive steps to maintain peace and stability in what is, a very strategically important area for India.
What were the remarks by Muhammad Yunus that caused such concern? The ones Debarma reacted to?
Well, Yunus reportedly described India's northeastern states as basically an economic extension of China, pointing out they lack direct sea access.
Okay.
And he suggested closer economic ties between Bangladesh and China, implying that India's northeast could benefit by using trade routes through Bangladesh.
I can see how that might raise eyebrows in India.
It definitely did. It drew strong reactions, notably from Assam's chief minister, Himanta Biswa Sarma, who publicly criticized Yunus's view.
And Debarma also brought up another point about regional dynamics, didn't he? Something about tribes in Bangladesh.
Yes, beyond the destabilization fears, he also argued that India should support indigenous tribal communities in Bangladesh's Chittagong Hill Tracts.
Which communities?
He mentioned the Tripuri, Garo, Khasi, and Chakma people. He pointed out that they share cultural ties with groups in India's northeast and suggested they face difficult conditions and discrimination in Bangladesh and have historically wanted to be part of India.
So his overall message is one of caution and needing proactive defense of the region.
Precisely. He's pushing hard for strategies to counter anyone trying to sponsor violence or unrest there. He stressed protecting the people and maintaining stability against these potential external pressures and, well, the complex geopolitics of the region. It really highlights how sensitive things are in the Northeast.
It certainly does. Okay, shifting to some more positive news. On the technology front, India's hit a major milestone, establishing its first manufacturing plant for gallium nitride semiconductors.
Yes, this is a very significant development for India's tech sector, a big deal. This new facility is in Nava Raipur in Chhattisgarh.
Right.
The chief minister, Vishnu Desai, laid the foundation stone. The company behind it is Polymatech Electronics, an Indian firm.
And they have some pretty big plans for production, I hear.
Hugely ambitious. They're aiming to produce 10 billion gallium nitride GaN chips annually by 2030.
10 billion. That's a staggering number. What kind of investment are we talking about?
Well, the initial phase is around 1,143 crore, but Polymatech is committed to future expansion too, planning investments up to about 10,000 crore down the line.
Wow.
The plant itself covers 1.5 lakh square feet. It's a massive step because these GaN chips are becoming really crucial for next-gen tech.
Can you give some examples? Where are these GaN chips used?
Sure. Think 5G. Even 6G mobile networks, they offer better power efficiency and high-frequency performance. Also vital for high-performance laptops, advanced defense systems, and the whole power electronics field. Electric vehicles, efficient power supplies, that sort of thing.
So they outperform traditional silicon chips in many areas.
In many key applications, yes. This whole initiative fits perfectly with India's goal of reducing reliance on imported semiconductors and becoming a global tech design and manufacturing hub.
And the chief minister was quite enthusiastic about it.
Absolutely. He highlighted the role of Indian engineers in driving innovation and self-reliance in this key sector. He also mentioned how Nava Raipur's location and the state's supportive policies are helping it become a major industrial center.
And the company itself.
Polymatech's MD was also very optimistic, talking about meeting domestic demand and positioning India globally. It's undoubtedly a landmark project for India's tech self-sufficiency goals.
Definitely one to watch. And staying on the theme of tech advancements, we also got news about a successful test of a DRDO weapon, the Gaurav glide bomb.
Yes, another big boost for India's defense capabilities. The Defense Research and Development Organization, DRDO, successfully tested Gaurav between April 8th and 10th. It's entirely designed and developed in India.
Okay, and what did the tests show?
They demonstrated its precision and its ability to hit targets accurately nearly 100 kilometers away after being launched from a Sukhoi Su-30 MKI fighter jet.
100 kilometers? That's significant standoff range. What does that mean strategically?
It's a major leap in long-range precision strike capability. It lets the Air Force engage targets from a much safer distance, reducing risks to pilots and aircraft.
Right.
The Gaurav is a 1,000-kilogram class bomb. It uses a dual guidance system, combines inertial navigation, INS, with GPS.
Where accuracy.
Exactly. Ensures high accuracy, even if GPS signals are jammed or degraded. And its design allows it to glide over 100 kilometers when dropped from high altitude. That makes it great for hitting well-defended targets without the plane getting too close to enemy air defenses.
A valuable asset. And I believe the private sector was involved in this too.
It was, yeah. Companies like Adani Defense Systems and Farhat Forge were partners in development and production.
So an example of Atmanirbhar Bharat in action.
Textbook example. Promotes self-reliance in defense. The defense minister, Rajnath Singh, and the DRDO chairman both praised the successful trials, highlighting its potential for enhancing India's strategic deterrence.
How does this compare internationally? Do other countries have similar weapons?
Several nations, including China and Pakistan, have developed precision-guided bombs. But the key thing about Gaurav is that it's fully indigenous, conceived, designed, and made in India. It really showcases India's growing capability in advanced defense tech.
Impressive. Okay, let's shift to economic policy. NITI Aayog, the government's think tank, released a report on the automotive industry.
That's right. The report's called Automotive Industry, Powering India's Participation in Global Value Chains. It really stresses the need for strategic incentives and developing large, integrated auto manufacturing clusters.
To boost India's global standing in the sector.
Exactly. And it sets some very ambitious targets for 2030.
Such as? What are the key goals?
Well, they're aiming for automotive component production to hit $145 billion by 2030.
Wow, that's a huge jump.
It is. And they want to triple exports from about $20 billion now to $60 billion. Plus, they project this growth could create 2 to 2.5 million new jobs in the sector.
Significant economic impact. What does the report recommend to achieve this?
Several key things. Strong fiscal support, covering both operational and capital costs for manufacturers. Promoting those cluster-based ecosystems for better collaboration and R&D sharing.
Okay.
Also, specific incentives for branding and IP transfer, especially helping out the MSMEs, the smaller players in the supply chain. And, critically, big focus on skill development to ensure there's enough trained talent.
Makes sense. Are there non-fiscal recommendations too?
Yes. Simplifying regulations, allowing more flexible working hours, and pushing for more joint ventures and free trade agreements to boost competitiveness globally.
Where does India stand now in the global auto market, and what are the main challenges identified?
Right now, India is the fourth largest auto producer globally, making nearly 6 million vehicles a year.
Fourth largest, okay.
But despite that volume, our share in the huge global market for auto component exports, that's a $700 billion market, is only about 3%.
Low share. Why is that?
The report points to challenges like relatively high operational costs compared to some rivals, gaps in infrastructure, and lower spending on R&D within the sector.
So the core messages.
That timely policy support from the government, plus proactive industry efforts, are crucial to position India as a preferred global auto hub, especially with global manufacturing shifting. NITI Aayog CEO, BVR Subramaniam, really emphasized India's potential to be a leading alternative to places like China.
A lot hinges on getting those policies and investments right. Okay, turning to national security now. The National Investigation Agency, the NIA, has reportedly stepped up its interrogation of Tahawar Rana.
Yes, since his extradition from the U.S., the NIA is really digging deep with Rana. He's, of course, a key accused in the conspiracy behind the 26/11 Mumbai attacks back in 2008.
Right, the connection to David Coleman Headley.
Exactly. Rana ran an immigration business in Chicago, which is accused of being a cover, providing support for Headley's reconnaissance work for Lashkar-e-Taiba before the attacks.
So what's the NIA focusing on now in their questioning? What new information are they hoping to get?
They seem to be zeroing in on details about the 26/11 planning and execution that maybe weren't fully covered during his interactions with the FBI or the U.S. court case.
Like what?
Specifically, they're very interested in Rana's travels within India shortly before the attacks. Places like Hapur, Delhi, Agra, Kochi, Ahmedabad, and Mumbai itself.
Why those locations?
The goal is to verify intelligence suggesting these trips might have been linked to recruiting people for terror activities or to identify any local contacts he might have had.
I see. Are they also looking into his finances and other connections?
Yes, absolutely. They're meticulously probing financial support he might have provided to Headley or other Lati operations in India. And his links to Pakistani intelligence officers and operatives whose names came up before figures like Major Iqbal, Major Samir Ali, Abdur Rahman, Sajid Mir, those connections are under intense scrutiny too.
So the aim is to build a stronger case against Rana and understand the wider network.
Precisely. Build a comprehensive, legally solid case for his conviction in the 26/11 attacks, and also to potentially expose any broader conspiracy or plots against other targets in India.
A long and complex investigation. Okay, switching gears to something less grave but certainly disruptive, the chaos at Delhi's Indira Gandhi International Airport caused by a dust storm.
Yes, that caused major problems. A strong dust storm hit the capital, leading to widespread flight delays, cancellations, and understandably a lot of frustration for travelers.
And Air India seemed to get singled out for criticism.
They did. Passengers were particularly critical of how Air India handled it, alleging mismanagement. Reports from Terminal 3 mentioned chaotic scenes, almost stampede-like conditions because of frequent poorly communicated gate changes.
Lack of communication is always a huge issue in these situations.
Definitely. Passengers felt there weren't enough staff to manage things or answer questions effectively.
We saw a lot of passenger accounts on social media, didn't we?
We certainly did. People sharing experiences, describing mini protests at gates out of sheer frustration.
Yeah.
Some accounts highlighted elderly travelers left without food or water for long periods. One specific flight, Air India AI 2512, got a lot of attention, reportedly delayed over 11 hours with very few updates.
11 hours with no updates, that's rough.
Passengers on that flight complained about a lack of basic amenities, especially for infants, pregnant women, the elderly. Accusations flew about unresponsive staff, even claims that airport security weren't helpful.
Were other airlines affected too, or was it mainly Air India facing the heat?
Oh, other airlines were definitely affected too. Indigo, for instance, issued travel advisories about cancellations and delays. But Air India seemed to catch the most flack for the management side of things. The whole episode really raises questions about Air India's preparedness for these kinds of weather crises and their operational management, especially now that it's privatized.
Yeah.
It highlights the need for better crisis protocols and communication across the board in the aviation sector.
Absolutely. Okay, now let's address a potentially sensitive issue. The possible revocation of the Overseas Citizen of India, or OCI, status for Dr. Sapna Samant. She's a filmmaker based in New Zealand.
Yes, Dr. Sapna Samant, she's a GP and filmmaker in Auckland. Reports suggest the Indian government might revoke her OCI status.
And what reasons have been given by the Indian High Commission?
They've reportedly cited her involvement in political activities and her online criticism of the current Indian government's policies.
Specifically?
They mentioned her social media posts, a radio interview she did, and her association with New Zealand's Green Party. They claim these actions could potentially incite social disharmony in India.
How has Dr. Samant responded to this?
She's strongly denied being anti-India. She insists she has a right to critique democratic processes and advocate for human rights, both where she lives and globally.
And losing OCI status would have real consequences for her.
Oh, definitely. It would mean she couldn't travel to India without getting a specific visa, which would disrupt plans she has to visit her foster son there. She's apparently appealed the decision but hasn't heard back yet. She's also voiced concerns about political interference in citizenship matters and what this could mean for freedom of expression for other New Zealanders of Indian origin.
This case does seem to highlight a tension sometimes seen between the Indian government and parts of the diaspora, doesn't it?
It certainly does. It brings into focus those dynamics, especially with diaspora members who are critical of the current administration's policies.
Right, there's that ongoing debate.
Exactly. Critics worry about Hindutva nationalism and its impact on secular democracy, while supporters defend the government's development and security policies. Dr. Samant's situation illustrates the challenges people face when speaking out. It raises questions about balancing national rights regarding citizenship with individual freedoms for overseas citizens.
And it could potentially impact relations between New Zealand and India, too.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Especially with things like the free trade agreement negotiations ongoing between the two countries. It adds another layer of complexity.
Indeed. Okay, moving to the financial markets. SEBI chairman Tuhin Kantapande recently laid out his vision for the Indian stock market.
Yes, he did. He emphasized 4 pillars for SEBI's approach: trust, transparency, technology, and teamwork.
The 4 T's.
The 4 T's. SEBI's core job, of course, is protecting investors, developing the market, and regulating it effectively. Pandey stressed simplifying regulations, making business easier, but also maintaining market integrity.
How did he frame their approach to regulation?
He talked about using a risk-based approach to scrutiny, moving away from maybe more cumbersome micromanagement practices of the past.
And how does he see the health of India's market right now, given global uncertainties?
He really emphasized its resilience despite global economic volatility. He credited India's strong payment and settlement systems for some of that strength.
Okay.
And he highlighted the continued trust from foreign institutional investors, FIIs, pointing to the consistent double-digit returns the market has historically delivered since the 90s.
So confidence remains high despite global headwinds.
That seems to be the message. He pointed to India's projected GDP growth of 6.5% and the supportive government policies as attractive opportunities for investors, both domestic and foreign.
What specific initiatives is SEBI focusing on? What are their priorities?
Well, they've been increasing market surveillance, looking closely at things like the performance of small IPOs and subscription levels in SME IPOs. They're also working on streamlining processes, like pushing forward with a common KYC framework across the financial sector that should cut down redundancy.
That would be helpful.
And they're exploring allowing foreign individuals to invest directly in Indian markets, which could bring in more capital.
Interesting. What else?
Pandey also stressed investor awareness and education warning against risky behavior, like borrowing to invest. They're promoting new futures markets, tackling hurdles in agricultural futures, and even looking at using AI for better regulation.
AI and regulation. Okay.
And they're actively fighting financial misinformation, recently taking action against a number of so-called finfluencers on platforms like YouTube for giving misleading advice.
Keeping the market clean. Okay, finally, let's look at the PM-WANI scheme, the public Wi-Fi initiative. It seems to be facing ongoing challenges.
Yes, PM-WANI, Prime Minister's Wi-Fi Access Network Initiative. It's a really ambitious plan to set up public Wi-Fi hotspots across the country, boost internet access, but it's hit some significant roadblocks.
What were the original goals and where are they now?
The initial targets were huge, 10 million hotspots by 2022 and 50 million by 2030.
50 million?
Yeah, but the actual deployment is way off track. Only about 280,000 hotspots are up so far, and almost half of those are concentrated just in Delhi.
280,000 versus a target of millions. What's the main problem holding it back?
The core issue seems to be persistent disagreements over tariffs and revenue sharing between the big private telecom operators and the government agencies running the scheme.
Ah, the telcos.
Right. PM-WANI relies on neighborhood public data offices, PDOs, offering cheap internet. But operators like Jio and Airtel argue that being forced to provide bandwidth to these PDOs at low regulated rates undermines their own business.
They see the PDOs as competitors.
Essentially, yes. They see PDOs buying bandwidth and reselling it as direct competition to their own internet services.
Has the government tried to fix this? Have they adjusted the scheme?
They've tried. They amended the framework, for example, allowing PDOs to use regular fiber-to-the-home connections instead of more expensive leased lines.
But that didn't solve it.
Apparently not. The telcos reportedly remain resistant, mainly because they're worried about government setting tariffs and disrupting the market.
But isn't there an argument that PM-WANI could actually help the telcos by growing the overall internet user base?
That's exactly the argument from groups like the Broadband India Forum. They say PM-WANI complements the telcos, boosts digital infrastructure, and helps bridge the digital divide, especially in rural areas.
Where it's needed most.
Precisely. But despite that potential, the hotspots are mostly in urban areas, leaving rural regions behind. It really shows the complexity of balancing affordability, market competition, and building digital infrastructure in a country like India.
A tricky balancing act indeed. We also got another report, sadly, about vandalism at the Indian Consulate in Melbourne. This seems to be happening repeatedly.
Unfortunately, yes. Graffiti was found at the entrance again, sometime between Wednesday and Thursday.
And the response?
The Indian High Commission in Canberra has formally raised it with Australian authorities, expressing concern. Victoria Police are investigating the damage, asking for public help, but no suspects identified yet.
And as you said, this isn't the first time. How is the Indian-Australian community reacting to these incidents?
You're right, it's happened before, often linked to international tensions or events. The community is increasingly frustrated and concerned about security. They see these acts as intimidation and hate, not just vandalism.
Are they satisfied with the law enforcement response?
There are growing concerns about what they see as a slow response and inconsistent enforcement of anti-vilification laws, even though Victoria did strengthen those laws recently.
So the local government has taken some steps.
The Victorian government under Premier Jacinta Allan passed amended laws earlier this year, specifically to tackle hate speech and acts like this. But the community is still pushing for more effective, consistent measures to ensure their safety.
They want more proactive protection.
Exactly. They're stressing the need for the Australian government and police to ensure safety, respect all communities, and provide equal protection. This latest incident just underscores the ongoing challenges in securing diplomatic premises and the wider issue of attacks targeting the community. Raises questions about policy effectiveness and the need for stronger action.
A troubling pattern. Okay, lastly, let's turn to the weather. The forecast for India's monsoon, which is always so crucial.
And on this front, some potentially encouraging news. The forecast suggests this year's monsoon might be less extreme, more normal compared to recent volatile years.
Why is that? What's changed?
The La Niña conditions in the Pacific Ocean, which strongly influenced recent weather patterns, including the monsoon, have ended. We've transitioned into what's called a neutral phase.
ENSO neutral.
Exactly. That significantly reduces the chances of either severe widespread droughts or excessively heavy rainfall across India during the upcoming monsoon.
So what does this neutral phase actually mean for forecasting? Does it make it easier or harder?
Well, ENSO neutral means Pacific sea surface temperatures are near average. Not significantly warm like El Niño, not significantly cool like La Niña. It's considered the baseline, but actually happens relatively infrequently.
Okay.
What makes this year a bit more complex for forecasters is that the Indian Ocean surface temperatures, which also directly impact the monsoon, are also expected to be neutral until at least August.
Both oceans neutral.
Yes. So meteorologists have to look more closely at other factors, conditions in the Atlantic, internal atmospheric dynamics, pressure systems, to get a precise forecast.
So with all that complexity, what's the general expectation for rainfall?
Despite the forecasting challenges of neutral conditions, The consensus is that the risk of either severe drought or devastating floods is minimal this year.
That's good news.
SkyMet, the private forecaster, put out its initial forecast predicting rainfall around 103% of the long-period average. That's comfortably within the normal range.
Right.
And interestingly, this is the first time in 12 years that the monsoon won't be strongly influenced by either El Niño or La Niña.
A return to normal conditions in a way.
In a way, veteran meteorologist Dr. Amrach Even stressed the need for careful forecasting because a slightly wider range of outcomes is possible under neutral conditions compared to El Niño-La Niña years. But it's also a valuable chance for scientists to study the monsoon without those dominant ENSO signals, potentially improving future prediction models.
Fascinating. So as we wrap up this deep dive through today's headlines, a few big themes really stand out, don't they?
They certainly do.
India's tech progress is clear defense, semiconductors, it's moving fast. There are efforts to streamline bureaucracy, like the passport change.
Though challenges remain, like with PM-WANI.
Exactly. And it's also clear how much global events and regional dynamics impact India, both externally and internally.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully this detailed look has given everyone listening a clearer picture of what's shaping India right now, maybe provided some of those aha moments without being too overwhelming.
Yeah, cutting through the noise a bit. And thinking about those tech strides, particularly in defense and semiconductors, it does make you wonder, doesn't it? How might these advancements shift India's geopolitical standing in the years ahead?
That's a great question. Definitely something to keep an eye on.
It is.
And remember, these headlines are just snapshots of ongoing stories. We really encourage you to explore the areas that caught your interest further. Continue that journey of informed discovery about India and its place in the world.